Hello and welcome. I'm so excited for today, my friends, as I'm here with an amazing woman, entrepreneur, podcaster, influencer, productivity strategist, certified health and wellness coach, and so much more. Her name is Sarah Steckler, and you guys, you won't want to miss out on this opportunity to hear from such a talented and insightful human being as we shed light today on what it means to practice mindful productivity. Sarah has spent the past 10 plus years of her life cultivating tools, systems, and strategies to better organize her life, prioritize goals, and create solid game plans to make things happen. She's also coached over 100 other individuals through the process of living a life infused with mindfulness and self-care. Two things I'm super passionate about as well. I don't know about you, but I have all the feels gearing up for this conversation as we sit down together to simply talk and share what it's been like for Sarah on her own personal development journey and how Mindful Productivity blog really came to be. Little fun fact is that Sarah and my sister were actually college roommates back in the day at Western Washington University. So that's how our paths connected. And then we started following each other on social media. And the minute I launched this podcast, I knew Sarah would be the perfect guest to bring on, as basically everything she says and teaches deeply resonates with me on so many levels.
Welcome to At Home with Emma Rose. Your host, Emma Rose, has learned everything she knows the absolute hardest way possible and will help you navigate through the process of clearing the clutter, calling out your well-worn habits that might need changing, and finding the path to real, sustainable success in your business and life. Here's your host, educator, photographer, web designer, and latte lover, Emma Rose.
So let's do this. Sarah, welcome. Thank you so much for coming on today to share a piece of you with my listeners. I'm just so grateful to have you.
Thank you for having me. Such a warm welcome. I'm like, okay, yeah, let's do this.
I'm grateful for this opportunity and just to chat about productivity, wellness, and more. I mean, let's just kick this thing off. Can you tell us a bit more about you, where you're from, where you're living now, how you eventually decided to start the Mindful Productivity blog? Just talk me through it, lady.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, it's so hard to pick a spot to begin. Basically, I kind of like to tell my story that I went through this big quarter life crisis. I got married to my husband who's in the military and we moved across the country and I was like, what am I doing with my life? And through a lot of trial and error, I ended up going back for my master's in health and wellness coaching and it was total game changer. And I started my coaching practice in my business. That was around 2015. I was floundering around for a while. And Emma, if you saw my original branding, I really hope you didn't. It was so embarrassing. Anyway, it was neon colors and I called myself a self-love coach and it was fun. It didn't really resonate. I had no idea what I was doing. And as I just kind of worked through, my personal life and going through some personal things myself, I really started tapping into mindfulness. And then I really loved the whole let's be productive and let's hustle. But it always felt kind of, I don't know, super masculine energy, kind of, we have to get more done. We have to work harder, and found myself always getting kind of burnt out or being on the verge of it. So I was like, how can I infuse mindfulness into productivity and how we feel and getting more done, but feeling good and not feeling like we have to be a slave to our business or anything we're working on. And so that's kind of how I created that. And I've really been running with that specific niche for the past year and a half specifically. And it's been so fun. And it's so fun to see how many people are like, ooh, mindfulness with productivity. Of course, that makes so much sense.
No, and I'm super fired up about this conversation because, as you know, the last year of my own journey has been all about productivity and systems and how to not burn out because it's such a real thing in our industry and the creative entrepreneur world. I love that you put those two words together because it is one of those dings. Wait, I want to learn more about this. How can we practice more mindfulness with productivity? So kind of talk me through mindful productivity and how those two words came together for you and what do they mean?
Well, I think it's important to look at each one individually too, right? So when we think about mindfulness, it's kind of been this trending thing over here in the States. It's the practices go back so far and really it's about cultivating awareness within yourself and being present, and being in the moment. One of the things I always tell people is giving yourself permission to start from where you are, any given thing you're working on, whether it's business or a fitness journey, just starting from where you are. That is so crucial to productivity too. So I think sometimes we get in this zone that we have to be super busy or be on all the time or be working. I mean, when I first started my business. I don't know if you can relate, but I was like working all the time, like not sleeping. If I wasn't working, then I wasn't being productive. And so I was like, there's got to be a way that this can feel better. So mindfulness is really intertwining the two. And it's also creating space for breaks and knowing how to manage your energy levels and how to tap into your mental energy and really making that a part of your business, how you're being personally productive, how you're setting boundaries in your life. So that's kind of where it begins.
I love that so much. And like I said before, is that I just deeply resonate with so much that you say because it is so true, all of that. And you mentioned something that I've talked a lot about this past year and a half is that putting yourself first is not selfish. So we're going to talk about boundaries and why it is so important to be selfish as human beings, and stepping away from the work and creating that space. So what's something that you've learned with the whole selfish concept?
Well, it's so interesting because I think this comes up a lot. And I think we feel like that analogy, right, about putting on your own oxygen mask first. And it's like so cliche, but it's like so relevant is that we think that we can do so much without taking care of ourselves first. There's kind of this glorification of it, like, oh, like I only got this much sleep and I'm still doing it. I'm taking care of the kids, even though I haven't eaten all day. And part of us feels proud for that, but it's like, that's so not sustainable. And so I think too, as women, I think it's more common. We feel like we're being selfish if we put ourselves first. But honestly, the more, and really embodying this, right? Because I still struggle with it, is like realizing that the more that we take care of ourselves and the more that we include personal boundaries in our life and that we do take time away from others to take care of ourselves, the more we're going to like show up as our best self. It's like if I'm not truly taking care of myself first, then I'm not going to be as nice of a wife to my husband. I'm not going to be as present with my bulldog, whatever. Like I'm just not going to be that same kind of person. Really just tapping into the why of it. Why do you want to take care of yourself? So that you can show up as like the best version of yourself.
Right. You are taking this, at least for me, when it came to exercise and my journey with all that and putting self-care first, is it felt selfish. Just when you are wearing all the hats, whether it's a mom, maybe you have another job. But the reality is that, like you said, when we're able to do that, we're better able to show up in all the other areas of our lives. And I'm just a huge believer in boundaries and setting those boundaries intentionally. You mentioned something before and it made me laugh about when your business first started. I mean, Sarah, I was answering phone calls on my personal cell phone at like dinner time. And now, I'm excited to sort of talk more about boundaries as well, because it's something that once I was finally able to recognize and plug into my own systems and everything really was a huge game changer for me. So I want to talk a little bit about boundaries and what are some that maybe you've set in your own life and business this past year to help you find more balance and cohesion in your life.
Yeah. And it's like always a process, right? I'm always fine tuning them. One thing I'll say real quick is that I think anytime we get frustrated or we're like on that verge of burnout or like something just really makes us just really frustrated, it's usually a personal boundary issue. If someone else has done something and we can't quite put our finger on it, usually is like, oh, there's a boundary that's been crossed that like I'm not aware of or that I don't know that I need. So like that started happening in my business.
Yeah. And that's also the reality that you are at fault for that, owning that
exactly.
This happened because I did it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's kind of that hard truth reality. But it was like, I started realizing in my business that like I was always working, or that anytime, a client was like sending me a message on Voxer, I felt like I had to respond immediately. And so like one of the biggest things I did first was go, okay, let's make it clear with my clients with communication, because people like coaching people one-on-one, there's so many personal things that come up and I want them to know I'm always here for them. But at the same time, it was like, I can't respond within 30 seconds every time I get a message, right?
Yeah,
so like it was setting office hours around that or expectations. This is how soon I will respond. These are the days that I'm typically working, or these are the days that you can expect a longer response from me. So even just doing things like that, and then also setting a stop time to the end of my work days. That
for sure
was huge.
Yeah, I love the setting expectations. When a client books me now, they receive this beautiful, nice, big magazine. I say the best projects happen when there's solid communication, laying out exactly when they can hear from me, what days I'm actively working on a project. It's just been so much better, and not taking calls on the cell phone anymore.
Well, and then how nice is that, like to know every day kind of like what you're doing,
exactly.
Right? And have that boundary with yourself too.
A lot of photographers will be listening to this. And I think something with setting boundaries is that it is really hard to say no. when I decided to put myself first and be selfish in quotes, I had to say no to so many things, even social events, if I knew it was going to derail me from focusing on, my goals at that time. But what are your best tips for people struggling with the overwhelm and so busy on how to say no and how to approach that?
Yeah. Well, I think it's first of all taking away that it's a negative thing. I
Right.
think we feel guilty saying no, or we even assume that maybe if someone's even reaching out for us for help or as a client, a potential client, that if we say no, we're going to leave them hanging. But what I like to remember is that saying no is saying yes to something else, right? And it's prioritizing. And also, I like to think of the no's in my life, whether I'm saying them or whether other people are saying them to me, is kind of bumpers, like as if you're bowling. So it's like every time I hear a no, it's just like a little nudge to keep me going on the right path. Even if it may feel like, oh, that sucks, that was a no, I know that bigger picture, that's leading me, at least that's what I'm hoping to believe, right? Like that's leading me to where I really want to go. And so one thing I tell people is that if you're overbooked, if you're overwhelmed, and you do find that you have to say no, you're actually doing a service for that person because you're saying, I don't have the mental energy or the capacity or even the time right now to fully show up and serve you. So saying no to them is actually a really good thing. So I think kind of just embodying that mindset can help you say no and not feel so guilty about it.
Yeah. And I also think with that, especially as we go through different seasons, I remember when I first started my business, I was saying yes to everything and taking on way too many projects. So if you are in that space, being able to sit down with yourself in your business and say, okay, I had 2 projects last month or whatever service you do, and that was not enough. There were times I was waiting for more work to do, or possibly you had 4. I think it's just recognizing your limitations and being able to recognize those in the moment, that like when you are overwhelmed, it's like, okay, what is on my calendar right now and how do I avoid this in the future? Can you give me a rundown of what a week in the life looks like of Sarah Steckler?
Yeah, well, and it's been messy this past year moving back. My husband's still overseas and I moved back to the States. And so it's been kind of like messy figuring out what that's going to look like, what my structure has been. And what I can tell you is that it's still a process. But one thing I'm getting back to is structuring out my days, making sure that I'm batching more. But I do have days like Thursdays, I'm doing podcasts, I'm doing content creation, stuff like that. One of the personal boundaries I've set or business boundaries I've set is that I only take client calls right now on Mondays and Tuesdays. So those are my days when I'm working with clients. And it's interesting too, right? Because like even, I know that most people are going to be listening to this are going to be photographers, but even thinking about that, it's like at first I was scared to do that because I was like, oh, but like what if people aren't available? That rarely comes up. It's like, It's kind of like if you have a doctor's appointment, you're not going to be like, well, can you see me at 10 p.m. at night? You're going to be like, oh, they have office hours and I'm going to find a way to make that work. And so every now and then there's someone that's like, oh, is there any way we could do this? And we make it work. But so that's really helped. And my week mostly is very introverted. So I'm actually finding ways to get more involved in community and stuff because my business is online. It's like, oh,
girl,
yeah.
The struggle is real.
I know. Like interact with people.
Right? Everyone thinks that I'm this extrovert and I am in some regard, but oh my goodness, when I take all those tests, I'm a total introvert. I love being home. And
do you know what your Myers-Briggs is?
Oh gosh, it's been a while. I would have to pull that up, but it is funny. I'm an introvert.
Totally an introvert too. I call myself like an extroverted introvert because I appear extroverted, but I am not. But yeah, so my week is busy. Usually Mondays and Tuesdays, it's doing meetings, it's doing client calls. And then a lot of it is content creation. One thing I'm focusing on this year is my planners that I'm creating. And really also, this is kind of a tangent, but I also decided to retire 2 of my online courses that have been a big backbone of my business, but they were not helping me be focused. So it was also trying to making that business decision to move forward and saying no to something that wasn't really moving the needle forward. So it's tough making those decisions, but I'm definitely in a transitional phase of my business right now.
I love that so much. You mentioned client projects. I wanted to step back a little bit. I know we're still on your work week, but how did you find your first client?
Yeah, I love asking people this. So I actually I'm a huge goofball and I created a video and I threw it up on my business Facebook page. This was 2015, typical YouTube style video cuts. And I was just like, hey, this is what I'm doing. And I promoted it or boosted it. I had no idea what Facebook ads were. And it ended up getting 2,000 views and all these comments. And this woman reached out to me and she was just like, I have to work with you. And so she was my first client. Looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, I think I only charged her $40 or something for a session, super, oh my gosh, not sustainable. But it was like, wow, that was my first client. And
well, even with your first
yeah.
client though, you charged. I preach this to photographers and anyone asking me about pricing. I'm not super comfortable telling people where they should put their price point. That's a deeper conversation, but you have to charge, if you want people to respect you in the service, even if it is $40, or I think my first session, I charged $100. I don't know, setting those boundaries right out of the gate is important.
Yeah. And there's an energetic exchange there too. We feel we kind of bring more to the table when we're investing in something.
Totally. Yeah. So she booked you, and how did that first experience go?
It was amazing. We still talk. I still keep up with her. Yeah, she's super sweet. And it was so fun. She really helped me kind of figure out kind of like the direction I wanted to go. And it's been fun. And I actually still talk a lot through my master's program, we had to do like a coaching practicum. So we had to coach like quite a few people, pro bono and all of that to get our coaching skills down. And I still keep in contact with most of those people too. And it's just really fun to see like what they're doing now. It's crazy how fast time goes by.
Which brings me to sort of, this is why I started this podcast, is because I love to talk. I like conversations. I think they're just a really fun way to go back and forth. So tell me about because I'm so new to this too. I want to know more about your journey with the show and how it transpired.
Yeah, I actually have always known that I wanted to start a podcast. Like I actually found, how Facebook will tell you like what you posted or whatever, like years ago, like one came up like 10 years ago, like in 2008 or something. And it was, I can't wait to start my own podcast someday. And it like gave me chills. Cause I was
That's
like,
amazing.
I didn't know I was even thinking about it then. We'll throw it way back. In college, I actually started a podcast. I didn't even know that like iTunes existed, but I started a podcast. It was just me and my friends, and like they'd come over and we'd have a glass of wine, and I just like ask them questions and we talk about random stuff. And like it didn't go anywhere. It wasn't published anywhere.
No, that's awesome.
But it was super fun. And then years and years later, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, I bought this Blue Yeti microphone and I was like, I'm going to start a podcast. But then it just kind of sat and I didn't know the direction I was going with my business. I hadn't even started my master's at that point. And last year in February of 2018, I was like, I'm just going to do the thing. Like it was like the new year. And I was like, so I just like spent, I think it was like 72 hours researching everything I needed to do on the back end for tech. And I just recorded my first 3 episodes. And I think I had like my mom and a couple friends listen to them, and they definitely had critiques, but I still just went with it. I'm like, well, this is what I did. I'm doing it anyway. And so I just published it, threw it out there, and I was amazed at the response. I keep my podcast pretty conversational. It's usually just me rambling. I was really surprised at the response, how many people related to it, and how it just started growing. It's been so fun because I've never been super consistent with my blog. Like I'll kind of do it here and there, but like I have ran the podcast every single week for over a year now. And it's just something about talking and getting in front of a mic. It just like lights me up. I can tell that you feel the same way too.
Totally. It's this weird, I don't know how to describe it except that, my heart is, I've been wanting to do this for 2 years. And when we're talking about setting goals and everything, sometimes you just have to go for it and do it. And that's sort of what happened too here, is that I'm like, I'm doing this. I got to figure out everything on the back end and make it happen. But once you dive in, it's pretty exciting to see it all come together. That's awesome. Well, your podcast is awesome and I really enjoy listening to it. Like you said, you're so conversational. You're super easy to listen to. And I appreciate that because I listen to podcasts every day.
Oh, thank you.
So with that being said, how do you unwind or regroup from it all? Like what are some strategies that you implement to kind of step back, take a break, and refocus?
I am like big into nature. I love being outside. Like right now we've got like a pile of snow outside, and I am still making time every day to go outside. And I actually live next to this amazing nature preserve. There's like a forest and everything. I love to go on walks. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Japanese art of like forest bathing. It's called Shinrin-yoku. Basically just going out on a walk really intentionally, like without your phone, without like a real purpose, just really being present. And so I try to do that as much as possible. And it brings me so much joy. Like I love being outside. What did I say the other day? Like nature is the perfect way to shut off your brain without like shutting it down. It's the perfect way to really escape and find clarity and just kind of
your senses are triggering, and the smells and sights and that creative yeah, you're away from the technology. I
Yeah.
can't push that enough. It's
And,
just getting away from the phone,
Oh my gosh, yes. And there's this amazing book. It's called Your Brain on Nature. And it's a little like science heavy. It's kind of like reading like a peer review or something, but it's really fascinating. And they talk about just how being around, even just being around trees can really boost your immune system and activate your parasympathetic nervous system and your relaxed response and all of that. And so even just having, this is crazy, but even just having a photo of nature like on your desk can trigger similar things. So making time to be out in nature is kind of like my go-to thing. Anytime I'm like, oh my gosh, I call it like walking out the grumps. Like if I have a grumpy day, I'm like, all right, we're going to walk until we feel better. And like 10 minutes in, it always works.
That hits me deeply too, because I lived a very sedentary lifestyle before I went on my own wellness journey. And a big part of that is I wasn't spending time outside intentionally. I'd go outside, but it wasn't with the mindset of looking around at things and soaking it all in. As cheesy as that sounds, it really makes a huge difference. And one thing that I like to do too is when we're close enough to my daughter's school, I always walk her. And it's that little crispness in the morning, even if it's raining, it's 5 minutes there. Like, it's a tiny little window, but setting those times throughout the day to get up and go take a deep breath outside is really, really helpful. As we're sort of talking about balance, what's a key piece of advice you might have for somebody in a season of struggle and overwhelm right now?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're feeling overwhelmed with your business or even your personal life, I think it's really important to hold space for that. And one specific thing I love to do is just like write everything down, like do a big brain dump of like literally everything. And it sounds so simple, but how often are we writing or sharing, but for an audience? Like even sometimes like I've like posted things on Facebook that feel kind of cathartic, but I'm still writing for an audience, or I'm still writing because like maybe somebody will like it, right? Doing a brain dump or doing a free write is like a completely different container where no one else is going to see it. You might not even look at it again. It doesn't matter what it is. I'm having a day where I'm like, why can I just not move the needle? Like, why am I not getting things done? I like to do a brain dump of what I'm feeling, what I want to work on, and then I'll go back through and like highlight it and categorize it. Different things, like things I can just totally let go of now that I've defined them and written them down, things that I want to take action on, things that I can delegate. And that really, really helps in a huge way.
That brings me into the next thing is that you recently launched, you've told me about your mindful productivity planner. And when you were talking about making those lists and everything, how did the planner come to be and how do you use that in your life?
Absolutely. Well, the planner is something that I've been wanting to do for a long, long time. Kept putting it off, was thinking, well, how am I going to make it perfect? And kind of just, again, set that aside, much like the podcast. So the planner is really something that I created because I just kept hearing about how people really like paper planning, but like they had a hard time sticking with it. And it's also kind of like my own dream planner. So selfishly, I created it for that reason. It's completely undated and it's structured in a way where you can literally start it and then pause where you need to. Because what I found is I have this thing I call like planner guilt, where like I would buy all these planners and then I wouldn't use them for 6 months. And then it was like, I have planners still from like 2016. It's like, what am I going to do with these? So what it basically is composed of is, you've got monthly sections, you've got weekly sections, but then there's also what I call like a monthly bank. And within that bank, there's a couple different things. So there's a place to map out your month at a glance and kind of like what you're going to be intentional on. A lot of people, myself included, like kind of choose like a word for the year. I don't know if you've done that or if you've
What's your word this year? I'll tell you mine if you tell me
focus.
Focus.
Yes.
Mine's finish. So this is why we're here today, girl, because I'm, it's not finished or anything anytime soon. Obviously, I hope it goes for a long time, but starting it was my finish. You know what I mean? That makes sense. Yeah.
Yes, it does. Oh, I love that. Yeah. So there's like a month at a glance section that helps you kind of fine tune maybe the subcategory of your theme for the year, what you're working on. And then there's a page for like reflection and intention. So there's these things I call seed sentences where you kind of fill in the blank. So it's like this month I struggled with blank, but I learned that blank. So there's places to kind of reflect because I think a lot of times within planning, it's kind of missing the reflection aspect or the journal aspect
I
of
love
it.
that. Yeah.
And then there's bucket lists too. So it's like a monthly bucket list. Cause what I find is I'm always like, oh, I want to do all these things this month. And then I don't do them. Or I create, I don't know about you, but I have all these like Pinterest boards, like lifetime bucket lists. I find that I don't take action on them because I'm like, oh, well, it's like a lifetime. So I have forever to do it. But like having a monthly bucket list means that I'm actually taking action on those things this month.
I found too, when we're talking productivity and mindfulness, is not setting things. Obviously, it's awesome to have big goals that are year out or whatever, but setting them more intentionally on a smaller scale in terms of time has really helped me a lot. Even looking at 2 to 3 months at a time, or even like how my assistant and I work together with planning different things, is looking only 2 weeks out because it's easier to do it that way in certain things.
And I don't know if you've listened to Mel Robbins, the 5-second rule, but she talks about how if you have a container of time to do something, like you'll fill up that container. So if you have a week to do something, you'll take a week. And I find that to be so true. So yeah, like I've tried to minimize and break down my time. Like, okay, you literally have 30 minutes to do this. Let's do it.
Exactly. I could have I probably will have like a big chunk of my podcast will be talking about Trello because I'm obsessed. But
yes, I love Trello. And that's something too that is like, because I'm a big person that loves like that kind of stuff. Like I recently just moved over from Asana to ClickUp, and there's like so much more you can do with it, but it's like a little overwhelming. But I'm really like a person that I need my digital planning, like reminders to like actually pop up for me. But then I also need to kind of see it physically. So I kind of use my planner in tandem. But anyway, yeah, there's these like monthly banks of stuff. There's habit trackers. There's a quote for every month. And then there's something that's really kind of near and dear to my heart, and that's a success list. And so it's a place every month to write down not only things that you are doing, but things that are happening for you. And just like having that reframe, even just things like I went to the store today and I hit like all the green lights. And just that's just like, it's a fun way of kind of cultivating more gratitude.
Yeah, I love that. And I read a book, it's called The Universe Has Your Back, and I've talked about it a lot, but it really taught me how to look at the universe in a different way, that it's not out to get me, you know, and if something is like negative happening around me, how can I twist that to make that positive, or realize that maybe this person's being a jerk to me in this line or getting a coffee wherever I happen to be, that they're going through something and I'm not going to let that ruin my day. You know, I kind of got off on a whole different thing there, but basically,
I totally hear you.
You know, writing down the things that do happen that are positive, because I think often it's really easy to focus on negative and the things that aren't maybe going the way that you wish they were going, but being able to hit all the green lights and recognize that, and that was a win in your day or your week is awesome.
Yeah. And I think too, it's like giving that pause, like putting that space between things so that you can respond to stuff versus reacting. I feel like when we react to stuff, we tend to go into that negative headspace. But when we respond, we're like, ooh, how do I want to choose to move forward from something?
Yes, love that. Oh, so great. So I want to ask you one kind of broad question. Maybe we can dive into this a little bit. What do you wish you would have known when you first started this whole business of yours?
I like have always felt that I'm like a really multi-passionate person. So like I've always had trouble choosing something. And I've always had like all these side projects where people are like, can you do this? I'm like, yeah, totally. I wish that when I started my business, I wish that I knew this, but I wish that I really like took action on it. It's just really choosing one thing at a time and doing that and getting like really, really good at it and focusing on it. That would have helped me, you know, build and scale my business, you know, more sustainably at a more sustainable rate. And it's just like, it's confusing too for people, right? Like when you're running a business, if you're doing so many things, okay, how do I take action? How do I invest in this person? Or how can this person help me? So I wish that I'd actually focus.
You know, I'm the queen of dabbling and trying new things. But you're right. It's so easy as entrepreneurs and just creative hearts in general to want to do it all. And you feel like you have to do it because it's calling you, but really checking with yourself and being like, okay, do I really need to do this right now at least? Or can this go on my list of things to tackle later?
Yeah. And one thing I'll also say is I wish that I knew that my business was not my self-worth, because anytime there were things that didn't go as planned, or I totally thought my audience was going to dig something and then there were crickets, I would always get down on myself. And now it's like, oh, that's my business. It's not me.
Right. Oh, I love that so much. Yes, that hit home for me too, hearing that. Okay, well, I want to jump into just a couple rapid fire questions to let people get to know you a little bit better. Are you a morning person or a night owl?
Ooh, this actually goes back and forth. So I actually prefer to be up super early. I love being up at 5 a.m., but sometimes I get these creative hits where I have to stay up late. So it's a dance, but I prefer to be up super early.
So what is the funniest thing that's happened to you recently?
Oh my gosh. Well, it wasn't funny in the moment, but it's been snowing a lot. And my bulldog Bella is very stubborn and she likes to pull, even though she's 4 and we've been through this. I'm like, I can't take you anywhere. But she got really excited. We were out in the snow and she pulled and I went flying. So
I love it.
Totally landed. And I was super mad, but I'm sure it was funny for anyone that saw it.
That's awesome. Sean and I were just laughing about, because we went to WSU, go Cougs, and people falling all the time, in the snow. Like, it's really sad because when people just biff it, but then it happens to you and I felt all the time. So no shame there. What's your favorite word?
Ooh, favorite word. That's a good question. I'm going to go with opportunity.
Love it.
Not because I necessarily like the way it sounds, but just because I like to kind of embody that in any moment.
What is one of the most worthwhile investments you've ever made? Whether that's for your personal life or business, it doesn't matter.
Ooh, yeah, that was definitely my master's program, like
Love
totally
it.
Game changer. Yeah, just that's what triggered me into stepping into mindfulness and putting myself first and met so many amazing people there.
Oh, I like that because it's not only has served your business, but your life. And that's amazing. So last question, what is an unusual habit or an absurd thing that you love?
I don't know how unusual it is, but I'm like obsessed with journal supplies. I'll go to Staples and be like, oh my gosh, or just like go online and find like all those Etsy shops that have stickers and stuff. Oh, here's a weird thing. I love going to the library. And if I pick up a book and I'm interested in it, I totally have to smell it because library books smell so amazing. I don't know.
Oh my gosh. I love that. Riley and I go to the library all the time too. I can't say I've ever like smelled the books, but I'll have to try that next time.
They have like this old, like historic smell to them. I don't know.
Sarah, thank you for coming on today and chatting with me about all of this. I loved learning more about you. I know we've kind of been connected, but from afar, we haven't really sat down to talk together. And I just wanted say thank you. And then also, is there anything that we haven't covered that you want to highlight before we wrap this up?
I have just loved talking with you. This has been so much fun. Thank you so much for having me. And I guess my only last thing would be like, if you're feeling overwhelmed, you're totally capable of focusing. You're totally capable of moving the needle in your business and taking care of yourself. It's a dance that you can create in your life. And I think sometimes we all just need that reminder, like you can do it.
100%. Yeah. And also having a really solid support system and realizing whatever you're going through that you need help with is accepting the people who love you. For me, when it came to my own health and wellness, I took everything my husband said to me. He was trying to help, but I took it in such a negative way of just once I was finally able to accept his help, it made the journey a lot smoother.
Oh, I love that reminder. Yeah, that like people are really there for you.
Right.
Yeah. Even if it doesn't come off the way you want it to. Like, yeah, I love that reminder.
Where can people find you?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I love to hang out on Instagram. Like that's my place. And I'm at Mindful Productivity Blog. You can also find me by listening to the Mindful Productivity Podcast. We're on iTunes and Spotify. I say we because Bella's always next to me. And she's sometimes snoring in the background. Otherwise, I'm just on my website at mindfulproductivityblog.com.
Well, I'm excited to share this with everybody and get the word out there about what you do because I think you are moving mountains, woman, and I'm so inspired by you.
Thanks for listening to At Home with Emma Rose. Visit athomewithemmarose.com and dive into the show notes for every episode. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.